What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with my Week 15 college football power rankings. Let's dive into it here. Dropping from my rankings after rivalry week, it's going to be SMU, Georgia Tech, and Pitt. All three ACC teams that dropped the ball this week. All three with a chance to get into the ACC championship, and it just didn't go in their favor. But those three do stay in the others receiving votes. Teams alongside San Diego State, UNLV, New Mexico out of the Mountain West. You got USF from the American, Mizzou from the SEC, Houston from the Big 12, and then UConn, the independent, going 9-3 this year in another great year for them. But 25 through 21, Iowa comes in at 25 after dismantling Nebraska on the road in the rivalry game. They get the right to jump back into the top 25. Another solid 8-4 year for them as we wait to see who they play in the bowl game. Navy jumps into the rankings as well with some other teams losing. They go on Thanksgiving night to Memphis and beat a good Memphis team to finish 9-2 before this Army game in Week 16. And it's a good season for them. Obviously, they're two tough losses, which is two teams that are really good. And unfortunately, they won't be playing in the conference championship game. Credit to Navy for putting in another solid year. Arizona at 23, they jump into the rankings as well after beating Arizona State on the road. Uh, Big shock, I think, of the year is going to be the Wildcats finishing 9-3. No one really had them being this good. 6-6 was kind of the ceiling for this team, and they just blew that out of the water. Not only did they beat last year's Big 12 champion, but obviously the rival in Arizona State in a pretty commanding way. Tennessee loses to Vandy at home. 8-4, I think, is kind of where a lot of people saw this team finishing 9-3 at best, and they just didn't have it against Vandy in the second half as Vandy pulled away. So that's why they dropped 6 spots here to 22. Michigan dropped 6 spots as well to 21 after an ugly loss to Ohio State. They had the first quarter was going, everything was going their way, but then pretty much after halftime, Ohio State just took over, did whatever they wanted in that one. The offense just didn't show up in this one, uh, meaning the passing game didn't show up for about the seventh week in a row for Michigan. So they need to figure that out heading into their bowl game and into next year. 16 through 20, I think you can put 17 through 20 in any order, wherever you want them at this point. Because all these teams, I think, add up and would be a really good game if they all played each other. But funny enough, North Texas and Tulane do play each other, and that could be possibly for the college football playoff berth, especially if North Texas wins this one, finish 12-1, win over Tulane. But James Madison could have something else to say as well, as if they win the Sun Belt, go 9-0 in conference play, 12-1, win their conference, it's going to be between one of these three teams here to get into the playoff. And then if Virginia wins as well against Duke in the ACC championship, they're probably in the playoff for that fourth conference champion. But if they lose and Duke wins, you might see James Madison and possibly North Texas or Tulane, whoever wins that game, steal that bid from the ACC over Duke. And at 16 is USC. Another great year for them, 9-3. Probably isn't enough to get them into the playoff with those three losses, but it's very adamant that USC is right there, just missing a few pieces, and I wouldn't be shocked if they finish 10-2 or better next year. 11 through 15 is SEC heavy. I have Texas at 15 with a win over A&M, jumping up 2 spots. The case for them to get in the playoff is there, but I think you got to schedule these non-conference games and they have to mean something. And I say that because, they chose to play that game and they lost. But at the same time, they chose to play that game where a lot of these teams didn't play that game. If they win that game, they're clearly in the playoffs. So it's just going to be interesting to see what the committee does here in the next few weeks. Utah stays at 14 after beating Kansas. 10-2, unfortunately, I just have a few better 10-2 teams than Utah, and they probably won't be in the playoff. Miami's a big question mark. Vandy's a big question mark there at 11. But I think Vandy has a better resume over Miami with the loss standpoint. And I don't know, it's just one of those toss-ups that I think, honestly, neither of anybody on this team besides Ole Miss could get into the playoff. Now, I drop Ole Miss to 12 just because of the whole Lane Kiffin situation. We don't know what that's going to look like with all new offensive coaches. Obviously, almost all of the defensive staff stays as the defensive coordinator gets promoted to head coach. So could be a little bit of an overreaction, but the players shouldn't get punished for this. but unfortunately they do because of the coaches leaving at this point in the season. And obviously, this team is more than likely going to host a playoff game as well. 10 through 6. We'll start at 10 with Bama, squeaking one out against Auburn as it came down to the wire yet again. But they get Georgia this week in the SEC Championship, which could be for their playoff spot. They win that game, they might be in. Or if they win that game, they are in. But if they lose, there's a chance that this team doesn't make the playoff and gets screwed over by making your SEC Championship game. Oklahoma, though, sits pretty. An ugly win against LSU at home, but they're 10 and 2, and they're more than likely in the playoff at this point, no matter what happens. And I wish I could say the same about BYU, who I moved up 3 spots after destroying UCF in a dominant win on senior night. Texas Tech rematch in the Big 12 championship game. Only loss that they have this year is to Texas Tech on the road. And if they lose this game, I don't think the committee should bump them out, but you just never know nowadays, especially when Texas is sitting there and there's definitely a school that can make them more money. Got to make those pockets bigger. So we'll never see, these little teams get in if there is that chance for that bigger team to get in, which is unfortunate because BYU has had a really good year this year. Notre Dame at 7. The case for them to not get in the playoff, I understand, but this team is probably the hottest team in college football. 10 straight wins in a row after losing the first 2 games by a total of 4 points to A&M and Miami. And I don't know, but if they put in Notre Dame over Miami and it's like 12 or 13, like the last few teams that get in, I don't think that's right. They should put Miami in just because they beat them head to head. But we will see yet again what the committee decides to do. Same with Oregon. This Oregon team has been resilient, 11 and 1 this year, 8 and 1. Their only loss to Indiana at home, who obviously could be the #1 team in the country if they beat Ohio State next week. They went into Washington and put on a good performance. Definitely a game they could have lost there just because of the rivalry, tough situation, especially at the end of the year. But Oregon took care of business here, and that's why they're moving up one. Then 5 through 1 are the same teams, just a little shuffle after A&M's loss as they dropped to 5. Suffered their first loss, which I think could be good for them. They've had a loss brewing for quite a few weeks now after squeaking by a few games, especially that South Carolina game. Still don't know how they won that game. I know it's a rivalry game. Maybe it's the best thing for A&M is they'll wake up going into the playoff here with a new energy to them. Same for Texas Tech. This team is just rolling right now, not coming off a loss, coming off a huge win to carry that momentum into the Big 12 championship game. If they win that game, no doubt in my mind that they are one of the top 4 teams that will get a bye. They've earned it this year with what they have done this year, played some really good football, only lost to Utah, and it just wasn't a good game for them there. But Texas Tech defense could be the best in the country, dare I say. Georgia, not the same. This Georgia team, I thought they were ready to take the next step this week against Georgia Tech, be that elite team, that top 3 team with a legit title contender, but they only won by 7 against Georgia Tech, only put up 16 points. Now the defense showed out, which was great to see, but the offense, after Georgia Tech gave up, 42 points to Pittsburgh, I thought Georgia could have easily put up 40, and that just wasn't the case here in this one. A win is a win, but if they want to beat Bama, they struggle against Bama. If they want to beat Bama, this offense has to show up here in this one. And then at #2 is Indiana. Not much to report there. It's just another blowout as they get Ohio State. Then obviously at #1 is still the Ohio State Buckeyes after beating my Wolverines on the road. This team dominated for 3 quarters after the first quarter. It was all Ohio State. Did whatever they wanted. Their defense was spectacular. Couldn't really make that Michigan offense drive down the field. If they did, it just resulted in field goals there. So give Ohio State credit here. If anything, we didn't think that there's any flaws to this team. They kind of took away those flaws, thinking, well, Ohio State hasn't played anyone really good yet. But they just went into their rivals' environment who they haven't beat in a little over 2,000 days. Pretty much blew them out. Score, only won by 18, but it was pretty much a blowout there as they get Indiana this week in the Big Ten Championship, which is going to be a huge game because, you win that, you're obviously the #1 seed, but you lose, there's still a chance that you might not even get a bye. So that might be one of the biggest games we've seen in recent history. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.